Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this month's Supporters Network webinar. This month, we're talking about responsible business, and I'll tell you a little bit why we're looking at that subject today a bit later on. But as normal, we'll start with a bit of housekeeping. This platform, Livestorm, works best on Chrome. I hope you all know by now. If you are trying to view it on another platform, maybe just try it on Chrome and it will work much better for you. If you've got any problems with the feed, then just hit the refresh button. You'll see on the right hand side there's a chat function as well as some question tab. We encourage you to use the chat function just to let people know that you're here. It's really great to have you network through that chat function, as well as, please, if you've got questions for the panelists, use the question tab. We will also be recording this webinar, as we do with all our webinars, and it will be available afterwards on our website and on our YouTube channel. Before we get into the content of the webinar, today I'd really like to welcome some new supporters to the Good Employment Charter who have joined over the last month. So welcome to Cars Pasties, Northwest Employers, Howarth Airtech, Psychdesk Limited, A. Connolly Limited, Shaping Cloud Limited, Sporting House and Broughton House Veteran Care Village. Great to have the 8 of you as part of the network and joining with us. Wonderful to have you as part of the good employment movement in Greater Manchester. And we look forward, hopefully, quite soon to welcoming you to a physical event so we can meet in person. We've got some fantastic speakers today. Sorry, I should have introduced myself. Ian MacArthur. I'm head of the Good Employment Charter. But we're joined today by John Quinton-Barber, founder of Social. Social is a integrated communications agency. I think, did I see, John, a piece of social media recently that you're almost in the top 100 of agencies in the country?
We are, yeah, 101.
101, very good. It's a nice number to have. Alice Kinder, solicitor at Anthony Collins Solicitors, and Courtney Lockyer from KPMG, who's the corporate responsibility assistant manager there. And all three will be giving perspectives on responsible business and why it's important for all good employers. And what better day than Earth Day to talk about responsible business, 22nd of April. Who knew it? I'm afraid this was one of the national days or the world days that passed me by until this morning. But another 22 I wanted to talk about was 22 years since John Elkington published what I think was his landmark book called Cannibals with Forks. And I'll put a link in the chat later about that book. But in that book, John talked about the triple bottom line, and it was the first time I'd read it in 1999, about the importance of profitability, environmental sustainability, and social justice, and that business needed to report on all three equally and pay attention to all three equally. Now, I would say over the years, the agenda has waxed and waned over the past couple of decades, and John and I were reflecting on that just before we came on air. But I think today marks a period of profound change at the end of the pandemic, or we're seeing light at the end of the tunnel at the pandemic. But not only have we had a pandemic, we've been living with a climate crisis. We've seen in the last year how Black Lives Matter and that whole agenda around ethnic minorities and equalities. But also we're seeing, as we're coming out of the pandemic, growing social inequalities. All of these things demand attention. Only this week, I think, and John being a football fan, the European Super League kind of brought this into sharp focus, that a single pursuit of a single bottom line, i.e. profit over everything else, is clearly no longer acceptable. If it's no longer acceptable in football and things can change in 2-3 days, then I think it's a lesson that we need to take, that we have to make progress in a more holistic way, thinking not just of single agendas, but multiple agendas. And responsible business matters to everybody. It matters to your customers and it matters to your staff. And I think we know that good employers care. And therefore, on that basis, that's why we wanted to bring this webinar to you today, so that you can start thinking about beyond just good employment, but looking at the other aspects to a responsible business. So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce John Quinton-Barber, who I know has been on a journey and he wants to share that journey with us. John, over to you.
Thank you, Ian, and good afternoon, everybody. I'm absolutely delighted. In fact, I think humbled a little bit and honoured to be here, because 8 years ago I set Social up, which is, as Ian said, it's an integrated communications agency. And so what? You know, there are many of us around. In fact, you talked there about the top 150, we're 101. So there's lots of us around as agencies. And 8 years ago, I was in Sale with my business partner. The two of us just set the business up. And the first 2 years of that, our life then was just survive. Responsible business didn't come into it, if I'm honest. It's about set this business up and we just need to make money. We need to make money and we need to survive, keep a roof over our heads, and we need to do it quickly. I'm delighted to say that 8 years on, we're now a 4 million turnover business, and we've got 50 colleagues in the business across Leeds, Bristol, London, Manchester and Liverpool. So we've kind of grown quickly, and I've got the scars to prove that. And it really wasn't until about 2015 that responsible business actually became part of my journey. And I'll tell you how it happened. It happened by chance. It didn't happen by the fact that I read a book or I thought I had to get into this space because it made sense. But two of my colleagues independently lost grandparents in 2015. And at both occasions, they said to me, can I have a day off for the funeral? Can I take some annual leave off? And it stopped me in my tracks, if I'm dead honest. It kind of, I thought, why can't I just give the day off? Why ask for a day off? It's really, your grandparents' funeral is a massive part of your life. And, you're asking me if you can take a day off. Of course you can. And I almost felt like, they should have felt that this would have been a given, that I, as an employer, would have just said, that's fine. And then my granddad, it's all relevant. My granddad was a miner and he died at 60. And I grew up in a mining family. And if you've watched Brassed Off, which is a film in the 90s about the mining strike and about the brass bands, the last scene of that struck home. In the same week that my two colleagues said, can I have time off, I watched Brassed Off again, and this is what happened by chance. And Danny is the conductor in Brassed Off. It's about the miners' strike, and it's about being the best miners band, the best brass band. And Danny is just focused as a conductor. He's played by Pete Postlethwaite, and he's just focused on getting them to win. Nothing else. Their lives, the miners' lives, are just falling apart in front of him. But he does not care. He just wants them to win. And the whole story evolves around their lives. And he gets to the Albert Hall and they actually win. And this phrase came out, and Danny said, he stood there, he didn't take the cup. He just said, I thought it mattered. I thought music mattered, but does it bollocks? People matter. That kicked me where it really hurt that week. In that week, that really woke me up to say, I'm running a business here and I am responsible for people. And it is people that matter. Shortly after that, our one value at Social is called Life Happens, and that was born. And that came naturally. It wasn't created by consultants. It wasn't created after a whole year of engagement. That was the value that we brought into Social. And Life Happens means if you work for us, it doesn't matter what life throws at you outside of the working world, we've got your back. And that's a big commitment to say that. And that means from small things, the washing machine breaking down, a pet being poorly, through to some of the bigger issues that we face as human beings, mental health issues or bereavements. We've got our colleagues' backs, and we pay them full pay if they're off for a day or 3 months or 6 months. And that for me was a birth of responsible business at Social. And then the story unfolds. We met, we were looking to how can we improve what we do as a business. And again, I was still very much focused on profit because I was a business, I had to make money, I was employing people. And then, the Good Employment Charter came across our desk. It just kind of like landed there. I think about 2 years ago, 3 years ago now, GMCA, we were approached by someone at GMCA and said, look, we're thinking about doing this and that kind of thing. Okay, I want to know more about this. I want to know what this means. And this actually feeds into what I'm passionate about. And I am really passionate as a business owner. And I'll shut up in a second, let everyone else engage and speak. But I'm passionate about it as a business owner, that my business that's making good money is actually supporting people, communities where we work, has no or low impact on the environment, and is making profit. And that is the triple bottom line, isn't it? And so much so, we're going further now, where we are hopefully going to become a B Corp organisation. We've done all our submissions, and the B Corp is it's a movement that's set up in America. It's come over to the UK. And basically, a B Corp organisation, you're making a legal commitment. You're changing your Articles of Association that says we will not work with anyone or anything that has a massive impact on communities or the environment, and we'll goddamn look after our people. And that is the start of our real journey. So we've done our submissions. It's been 2 years of work to get to the B Corp journey, to basically go for that. And we hopefully find out in a couple of months that we've got it. We're being assessed as we speak, and that then is the beginning of the journey. So I do believe I set the business up without this in my mindset. It was like, just bloody survive, John. We've got a business, and now I'm passionate about it. One of the things I want to finalise on is we do things at Social as you'd expect. You know, there's generous annual leave, 30 days. There's generous maternity leave, which we fully endorse. There's lots of things that we do, and I'm not going to reel off a long list. But I'm more than happy to chat to people afterwards or engage with people about that. But the one thing we just really recently introduced is that everybody at Social gets 5 days fully paid leave to do voluntary work. And that again is something that we're really passionate and proud about. But I don't think it goes radical enough. I think we need to be more radical. I think we need to write that in our Articles of Association, and that if you come to join Social in your interview process, you have to do it. When you join Social, it's a commitment you make as well, because it benefits you as an individual, for your community. But that's where we're at the moment. So I'm passionate about this, and I'm just delighted to be here amongst great company, just to share what we do as a business. Thank you, Ian.
John, thank you. That really is. I love the life happens value. It so summarizes, I think, where we're going to be, not just as organizations, but as perhaps an economy needs to embrace that sort of approach. I saw recently a little video, it's on the Economist website actually, and it talks about the future of the office, and reflects greatly over history how the office is a new thing relatively in terms of work, because you produce things, and it didn't matter where you produced them or when you produced them, and that was work. And we're coming back to that. So employers have to get their heads around, I think, not that you're buying someone's time to work for you, but you're buying what they provide in terms of services or skills. And that's what you're buying, and it doesn't matter when or where.
Absolutely.
Because life happens. So that really does underpin it. John, thanks very much. It's great opening, and I'm sure we'll generate some questions. If you've got questions, please pop them into the tab at the side. I want to turn to Alice now. Fancy having a solicitor, a lawyer, talking about this, but it's a lawyer from a particular company, Anthony Collins, who I know hold these sorts of values very dear to them. So I won't steal your thunder, Alice. Please tell us about Anthony Collins, but particularly the ethical business project that you've been involved with.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ian, and good afternoon, everybody. It's an honour to be here today speaking to you all, and I'm very excited to be sharing my perspectives on this, on responsible business. I'm Alice Kinder. I am an employment and pensions solicitor at a company called Anthony Collins. As an employee, the values of the place that I work are very important to me personally. Now, I completed my training at a large international firm, but I decided that I wanted to build my career at an organisation that was a bit more purpose-driven, and that's what led me to Anthony Collins when I qualified. What I particularly enjoy doing is working with social businesses and organisations that aspire to become more values-driven and help them to build those values into their employment strategy. And I'm especially interested in the social mobility challenge and how that's addressed within business. And I'm involved in a number of volunteer projects alongside my chargeable work, with the main objective of promoting social mobility and helping those from a disadvantaged starting point to achieve their ambitions. So just a little bit about Anthony Collins by way of background. We were founded in 1973 by a lawyer called, of course, Anthony Collins, whose Christian values drove him to start a law firm with a socially driven focus. And since those beginnings, we've grown our work and pursued our social purpose through our offices in Birmingham and Manchester. And we are nationally recognised now across 7 specialist sectors, which I've put up on screen. But ultimately, everything that we do has to achieve the primary focus of improving lives, communities and society. And that has influenced the sectors that we work within. Now, whether that is through delivering housing projects to ensure that the vulnerable have a roof over their heads, or helping an individual who has suffered the effects of clinical negligence, or dealing with a tribunal claim for a social care provider to make sure they can focus their resources on the people they are supporting, everything that we do has that underlying focus. Now, because our social purpose is at the heart of everything that we do, we take considerable steps to measure our social impact. And every year we produce a social impact report to review how our work has affected the communities that we serve and the positive impact that we have had. If you're interested in that, you can go onto our website, anthonycollins.com, and read our latest social impact report. And that will give you an idea of how social purpose and values-driven business can underlie the corporate strategy. Now, something else that's very interesting about our business, as part of our commitment to improving society, we offer everybody who works at Anthony Collins the opportunity to take up to 3 days per year paid to volunteer for a cause of their choice. Now, that could be working with schools to provide interview support, or volunteering in a charity shop, or pursuing a role as a school governor. There's no limit or nothing prescribed on what people can do. It's all about whether or not it shows that purpose. And across the firm, we see lots of staff taking up that opportunity to go out into the community and make a difference. And it's worth saying that we're ranked in the top tiers for all of the sectors that we specialise in. And what that shows to me is that improving the lives of our clients' respective communities is something that we are doing and are helping them to do more effectively through our work. Our ethos is very much around our social purpose, and we've got 5 core values which we aim to build into our employment practice. Our purpose, respect, building relationships, delivering excellence, and demonstrating integrity. And the purpose of having these values is to make sure that we have a strategy whereby individuals can feel supported, rewarded, and able to make a wider difference as they develop their career. Now, something that I'm very interested in talking about today is a national project that we've been working on to raise awareness of the importance of ethical business and how organisations can take those practical steps to make sure that their values are driving their strategy. Now, the background to this really is that the question of the broader purpose of enterprise has come to the forefront in recent years. And I think increasingly people are looking to businesses to contribute to the well-being of individuals, communities and society. And what we are learning is that doing business and meeting the needs of individuals, society and the planet are not mutually exclusive. And to me, they are, and they need to be seen as inextricably linked. I think the events of the past year have had a very large impact on this. UK businesses, to me, are under more pressure to demonstrate these positive values than ever before. I think the human and economic disruption of COVID-19, combined with an escalating climate crisis and a strong focus on social inequalities, partly brought about by the Black Lives Matter movement, have put businesses of all sizes under the microscope. And now what we are seeing is these businesses being scrutinised for their treatment of staff, their suppliers and their customers, as well as their impact on the environment. And I think that businesses who do not regard those impacts as important, or who are not making appropriate changes to their strategy, do risk suffering major reputational damage and in some cases financial losses. And what we decided to do, therefore, is to investigate the approach of UK businesses to this ethical challenge to see how much of a practical concern these things are and what businesses should be doing to make things better. So this led to our research. We worked with our research partner Opinion and surveyed 300 senior decision makers across the country in a range of businesses from different sectors. And the graphic on the slide shows some of our results, but don't worry, I'm going to break down the findings into a bit more detail. But just to summarise, what the results showed is that there is a profound shift in how we are doing business. 9 out of 10 of the businesses that we spoke to were either already adopting ethical practices or were committed to becoming more ethical. 78% recognised the impact of COVID in that process and how that has moved them forward in their journey. But interestingly, whilst the survey did evidence the growth towards ethical practices, it also showed that there are major barriers still to adopting them. So you'll see on the blue graphic that, as I mentioned, 9 out of 10 of our senior decision makers said that their businesses were either already on the journey to becoming more ethical or committed to starting this journey. And what this shows, I think, is that it is important to have these ethical values in your strategy in order to develop as a business and succeed. And interestingly, the majority said that they felt at least somewhat pressured to become more ethical. In my view, I think there are a number of factors influencing this position. I think, as I've mentioned, the pandemic has had a significant input into consumer perception and individuals starting to look at the values of the companies that they interact with. I'm recalling back to the start of the pandemic when there was a massive backlash around Sports Direct wanting to stay open and saying that they were an essential business. And I recall the individual perceptions around this. We've also seen the growth of the Black Lives Matter movement following the tragic death of George Floyd. And what this has done is placed a spotlight on diversity and inclusion and actually shifted the focus from statistical diversity, so what percentage of our staff are from a certain protected characteristic background, towards inclusivity and how are all of our staff made to feel included and able to succeed. These events have also happened alongside a global climate change crisis and a growing recognition that urgent change is needed to protect the environment for future generations. And in my opinion, increasing awareness around these issues has led staff to reconsider their priorities at work. For me and for others, the values of businesses that staff work with and work for is becoming increasingly important. And I think this shift is particularly apparent for the millennial generation, who ultimately are going to lead these organisations in the future. The survey was also clear that there are risks for businesses who don't adopt more ethical practices. Having a look at the green chart, recruitment difficulties, issues with retention and a negative impact on staff well-being are all highlighted as important factors. And what is vital for businesses in an increasingly competitive landscape is to make sure that they retain the talent that allows them to succeed and to stand out. Interestingly, market reputation and financial results were also highlighted as barriers. And to me, businesses are not going to succeed without diversity of thought. Now, looking at the red chart, it was interesting that there were a range of responses in terms of what improvement looks like. But I think it can be broken down into 3 key areas. Firstly, diversity of thought in leadership. Secondly, staff engagement. And finally, wider social responsibility. And I think without these things, businesses are not going to be able to generate the ideas that will allow them to remain competitive. And I think staff engagement is vital to ensuring that any diversity and ideas can be capitalised on. Because if staff are not interested or motivated by the wider workings of the business that they are employed by and the strategy of that business, they might not be enthusiastic about contributing to new initiatives that are important for success. And I think businesses do recognise now, or are coming to recognise, that there is a need to outwardly demonstrate their awareness of the issues affecting our society and show that they are giving back. Now, as I mentioned, the survey did reveal that UK businesses still face a number of major barriers to adopting ethical practices. Financial viability was shown as the largest barrier, but others also noted a lack of third-party guidance or information from the government around these issues. And so as a result of our findings, and in particular the barriers that were identified, what we did at Anthony Collins is developed a handbook, which is free to download on our website. And the aim of this is to help businesses at all stages of their journey to adopting a more values-based approach. And it covers a range of different practice areas, from commercial contracts and supply chain issues to employment practice. And all of these are vital to good employment, in my opinion. So just a few brief thoughts on what constitutes good employment coming out of this survey and coming out of what I've spoken about. I think this can be summarised into three things. Firstly, we need to move from the minimum. When it comes to ethical employment, UK legislation sets out important principles in ensuring the fair treatment of staff. And businesses do have to adhere to employment legislation, because if rights are breached, employees can pursue claims in an employment tribunal, which can generate significant cost as well as reputational damage. But whilst adhering to this legislation is a necessary basis for good employment practice, this alone isn't going to be sufficient to create a culture which places running an ethical business at its core. And I think there are other wider issues which might not be covered in legislation, but which are important to address. For example, thinking about my interest in social mobility, socioeconomic background isn't named as a protected characteristic in the Equality Act, but I'm sure we will all agree that this isn't an issue that can be ignored. Just because there's no legal requirement, for example, to not discriminate against somebody with a regional accent doesn't mean you shouldn't adopt practices to stop this from happening. Secondly, I think we need to make sure that we are addressing cultural change in an appropriate way. Now, this can come in many forms. So revised policies, reward strategies, as John has spoken about, all methods of communication. And these changes might not be supported by an entire workforce. But what I would say is that we need to focus on engaging with staff that are open to championing this positive change, because what these people can do is then act as internal ambassadors, securing support across the organisation. Finally, I think that businesses need to look at how they can influence the employment relationship to encourage change for the better. I think there are three elements to this. There are recruitment, the employment relationship itself, and employee exit. And none of these things can be dealt with in isolation. At each stage of the employment relationship, I think we need to be asking ourselves two questions. Firstly, how are we representing our values? And secondly, is what we are doing having the effect that we want it to do? And this self-evaluation can be combined with employee engagement surveys to assess what goals might be realistic and how ethical success is being measured. Now, that's all I've got time for today, but I have put the link to our website on the slide. So if you go onto the ethicalbusinessproject.com, you can have a look at our survey and download the toolkit. And do feel free to get in touch with me afterwards or to ask any questions if that would be helpful. Thank you very much. I'll hand over to Courtney.
Well, thanks, Alice. That was very comprehensive. People may have struggled to read some of the slides on screen, but be rest assured that all the materials will be sent round to everyone. And of course, it's recorded, so you'll be able to see them later. I think really interesting the whole value set issue. Time and time again in conversations about good employment, we come back to the issue around leadership and values set from the top. And I don't think we can stress that enough in terms of how businesses take forward not just good employment, but responsible business. And I see we've got some questions coming in, particularly from our very good friend, good afternoon, Donald Moore. We will come to these questions, but not before we hear from Courtney from KPMG. And Courtney, I know you're going to be talking about one of Alice's particular interests in terms of social mobility and work that you've been doing in and across Greater Manchester. Courtney, all yours.
Thanks, Ian. Yeah, it's great to be here with everyone today. My name's Courtney Lockyer. and I work in KPMG's corporate responsibility team, and I'm based in Manchester. And I'll apologise for the very wordy slides, which you'll probably struggle to read, but as Ian said, I'm sure they'll be circulated afterwards. So just for a bit of background, really, our work in corporate responsibility really serves our commitments as a responsible business, outwardly demonstrates our values as a firm. It's a way for us to support our wider community in which we operate in. It enables us to attract talent, opens doors with clients, and is a way for us to build public trust. Now, as a people business, our corporate responsibility strategy is really focused on supporting social mobility and tackling disadvantage. Now, the barriers to social mobility that we've identified as most material to our business, and therefore issues that we're most able to have an impact on, are particularly around education. So kind of the key sort of areas we look at are literacy and numeracy skills, but also with a focus on lifelong learning. And we really focus our efforts in these areas. Now, a key part of what we do is really engaging our clients, our suppliers, and our colleagues, as well as wider stakeholders, in relation to our strategic aims around improving social mobility. And our colleagues play a huge part in this. So similar to kind of what John and Alice have said, we provide volunteering time for all of our colleagues, up to 6 days of paid volunteering time each year. So they do make a real kind of contribution in terms of the time that they give to our communities, but also the skills that they offer as well. And we really know that regional inequality across the UK is a major concern. And that's why we take a place-based approach, targeting areas of greatest need with all of our activities. So our work is underpinned by a truly national approach. So our strategy is embedded across all 22 of our offices in the UK. And we really see that footprint as a sort of key differentiator in terms of our corporate responsibility efforts and how we try and distinguish ourselves in this space. We do know that some of the hardest to reach groups in the UK are outside of London, particularly coastal and former industrial towns. So we strive to deliver as much of our activity in these social mobility cold spots as possible. So we have a target of achieving 30% of our activity in social mobility cold spots by the end of 2022. We're currently just over 20%. And I guess one key example of our place-based work is our commitments as a Cornerstone employer in 3 government identified opportunity areas across the UK, one of which is Oldham. And our work there is really focused on connecting employers and young people with opportunities to kind of encounter the world of work. And all of these encounters are really aligned to the Gatsby benchmarks on good career guidance. So really kind of a key way of boosting careers education provision within social mobility cold spots. I suppose one of the kind of key projects that I wanted to share with you today is one of our new place-based initiatives. And it's really a first of its kind, at least for us, in terms of how we're developing our place-based approach to engagement. So we're actually working alongside business in the community, as well as kind of wider business stakeholders such as Marks and Spencer and Freshfields, to work in Rochdale to develop a long-term roadmap to address local inequalities. Now this really expands on our existing place work, and I suppose the key differences being that we're really trying to take our strategy and our focus on improving social mobility and tailor it to the specific needs and priorities within a place. So whilst doing that, also recognising the need to convene wider stakeholders, whether it's kind of our charity partners, multinationals, local organisations, local government, to really work together and provide sort of holistic solutions and support to those wider community needs. So just moving on, it really is a kind of learning curve for us. We are, you know, whilst we've been doing place-based work for a while, our work with business in the community is, it really is a kind of pilot for a new way of working for us. And as part of this, we've been developing our 3 tests for successful place-based engagement. So I just wanted to share with you today our current thinking around that. And this has really been developed in consultation with others, so particularly charities such as Right to Succeed and the National Literacy Trust, who have been doing place-based work for a number of years and doing it very successfully. So we really have been consulting others as we sort of build this out. And just to kind of run through our tests. So our first one is it needed? So the real focus here is using data and using stakeholder consultation to really understand what the needs and priorities are for a particular area, and using that to kind of help us define exactly what our activities and interventions will be. The second test, is it tailored? Is really making sure that we're shaping our offer based on local context. So, for example, whilst we have our own kind of CR strategy and programs, we really don't want to just deliver a KPMG program in the area because it's a kind of good thing to do and something that we're able to mobilize quite quickly. We really want to make sure that actually it does address a specific need within that area, whether that's through incorporating local labour market information into our employability skills workshops, or if it's engaging with local educators from schools or FE providers to kind of co-create a sort of tailored provision for their students. And third and final piece, really around, is it sustainable? And so what I mean by that is, with the kind of feedback we've had from anyone who's engaged in place-based approaches in the past has been that to make that lasting change, you really need to be in it for the long term. And to do that, we need to make sure that the social needs align with business benefits, to ensure that there's that long-term engagement, which will then mean you're able to achieve that long-term impact. Now, this is by no means a definitive list. It will continue to evolve, particularly, you know, as we're consulting with others, but also as we learn by doing as we go along as well. So when we apply that to Rochdale, so with the start of our work, which was at the beginning of last year, was really looking at the needs and strengths within the area. So, and I suppose the strengths is kind of a key thing to pick out here, because it's not a case of, you know, selecting an area and say, oh, well, you know, this isn't great, it needs to be better. There's a lot of strengths to build on, and we really want to kind of recognise and celebrate the great work that's happening, and actually what can we learn from that to help kind of grow it and develop it and enhance it further. So we're really kind of focused on the strengths as well as the needs. And as part of that, consulted with our local stakeholders too, just to really get that, okay, what are the needs, what are the priorities, what can we actually do to support? Around the tailoring piece, I mean, our focus is really on the sort of education and skills agenda. So as I said, not just about delivering KPMG programs, but working with the local educators to really understand, okay, well, if we're going to deliver this, how can we make it most relevant for your students and support them to develop their skills relevant for the future jobs market in Rochdale and the surrounding areas. And lastly, around the kind of, is it sustainable piece? As I said, needs to be that long-term commitment, and a big part of achieving that is making sure that we expand our cross-sector collaboration. So when we're working with business in the community and M&S and Freshfield, it's kind of, we need to make sure that we bring in that local employer lens as well, and are engaging businesses on the ground, and that's something that we're really in the process of doing at the moment. As well as bringing in the kind of local educator perspective, demonstrating the good work that's already been doing, but also making the connections. So if you know, the local FE provider is really struggling to engage with local businesses, how can business in the community, how can ourselves really help to kind of broker those relationships, or how could we connect them with the kind of great organisations across the region who already take on that role, whether it's kind of Bridge GM or an organisation such as that. I suppose just to kind of go back to that second test, really, you might see it along the side, and I don't know if you can read it, but just a quick snapshot of some of the things that we've been able to achieve so far. And I guess it's that balance between making sure you are addressing the local needs, but also recognising that actually you want to build trust in the local area, you want to demonstrate that you do have a commitment to the place that you're focused on. So we have kind of identified some immediate quick wins, particularly at the start of COVID with school closures, making sure that young people had access to resources to learn from home, things such as laptop donations, but also donations of brand new books and resources to support with at-home learning. So there is that sort of balance between, you want the really tailored support, but also sometimes you just need to kind of show willing and demonstrate that you are committed. And then as we look ahead, we do see that the kind of part that we play in Rochdale is really focused on that education and skills agenda. And our thinking around that is a focus on developing the whole child. So looking at what we can offer from an education and skills perspective, but also connecting with wider charities, wider organisations that look at the kind of more holistic approach to supporting young people in Rochdale to really fulfil their potential. Now, as part of this, we do recognise that need to kind of keep researching, keep contextualising and consulting with our stakeholders. So on the research piece, we've commissioned the Education Policy Institute to profile the disadvantage gap from early years to post-16 within Rochdale, and also kind of pulled together a sort of fine-grained mapping and analysis of the inequalities in educational attainment. So this will build on the existing research that's already there around regional disadvantage gaps, but really focus on Rochdale specifically. And again, as always, really want to kind of celebrate that success and use the data to highlight areas where disadvantaged young people are doing comparatively quite well. Alongside this, and this is kind of the phase we're at the moment, is the sort of contextualization piece. So it's gathering that wider data through the continued consultation, and through this we know that we've done quite a bit around business engagement. There's always more to do, and it will always be a focus for us. But we are keen to make sure the youth voice is represented in the work that we're doing as well. So understanding how young people feel about their opportunities in Rochdale. But also connecting with kind of wider research and consultation that's happening. So with the skills strategy that the council are working on, with the great work that's being done by the Greater Manchester Young People's Wellbeing Programme, which will give us a really rich data around health and wellbeing, and particularly mental health of young people. So there's a kind of a lot of I suppose the message here is we're not going it alone. There's always that need to collaborate and draw from the great work that's being done elsewhere. And then what this really will culminate into is a final report that we hope to publish in early 2022. So the aim here is to be able to really provide employers with some insight around the material issues that they can focus their efforts on around the agenda of developing the whole child in Rochdale. And it will also provide us with a measure to baseline our progress against as we kind of deliver upon our long-term commitments in Rochdale. And we hope as well the kind of insight that we're gathering through this programme, and as we're kind of testing and learning, that it will help inform our longer term approach in Rochdale going forward, but also other place-based strategies so that we can work in other areas of low social mobility across the UK and really kind of share what we've learned through our pilot campaign in Rochdale and sort of build it out. But yes, I guess the kind of key message here is we're still learning throughout this process. I suppose what we are really finding is that to be effective in this space, we do need to have that long-term commitment, and we do need to be collaborating with others kind of at a sort of full spectrum. And I suppose with that in mind, it's just worth highlighting as part of the sort of wider contextualization piece. We are hosting a virtual event to bring together employers, educators, and really discuss how we can best work together to support young people in Rochdale to progress and kind of build the skills they need for the future world of work, particularly in light of COVID-19. Something that I'd love members of this community to be a part of. So would love to sort of share more information on that. But yes, I guess I will leave it there, but really happy to pick up on any questions or go into any of this in more detail in the Q&A.
Thanks, Courtney. I particularly like the needed, tailored, sustainable kind of framework. I think that's really useful, and actually might lead into one of the questions that we've got from Jackie. And it was about a relationship with any organisation, a particular organisation, to enable volunteering days to be completed. Now, you all offer volunteering days, and in a previous life, when I used to work for Groundwork, Groundwork used to facilitate lots of volunteering days because we all had projects in communities that needed it most. So lots of corporates would come to us, and frankly, I'm not being too dismissive, it was money over the fence. In a way, it felt people went away feeling that they'd done something good, but actually strategically they'd painted a fence. You know, it was a team building day for the corporates and not really leaving much behind for the community. So I think it's really important that sometimes you go through a third party to understand what's needed, first of all, and then how you tailor it and how you make it sustainable. So I'd be really interested in all three of your approaches to that in terms of how do you frame the volunteering days?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in here. So our approach to our employee volunteering is that we have a skilled volunteering policy. So probably maybe 5 or 6 years ago, we would have had the instances as you described of colleagues going out and kind of painting fences or repairing community gardens, which, you know, great for team building. I think for us, where our thinking is now is more around we look at the kind of skills that our colleagues have, and actually they have a really highly skilled people able to make a really unique contribution in the community. So we look for volunteering opportunities that are focused on improving social mobility, but also for our colleagues to use those unique skills that they have as part of the work that they do for KPMG. So I suppose our Cornerstone employer work is a really good example. We work with Bridge GM and the Careers and Enterprise Company to identify schools that we can match our colleagues with. They'll provide things such as mentoring support, kind of development of essential skills, insight into the world of work, work tasters, and it's all things that, you know, not necessarily anyone would be able to deliver that, but for those young people, it is able to have a really big impact.
John, what do you do in social on this?
A little bit like Alice at the moment. We give the days, but say we're not dictating where and how they should use them days. So we're at very early stages. But I want a win-win out of this. I want us to be able to give back to local communities, but also for my colleagues to learn from it and experience from it, and use that as part of their development as well, both on and off the field, if I can use that phrase. So, so we're still very much at the early days. So I'm going to probably tap Courtney on the shoulder after this to say, you know, send me them details about these providers, because it would be easier for us to provide that. I think just very, very quickly, and with apologies, I have to go at 1 minute to 3 because I've got a 3 o'clock or so. But I personally, I've decided I'm going to do a day a month, give a day a month up, and I'm going to be starting to work with a growth company to offer my skills to young entrepreneurs and young people that want to get into business. So that's what I think. If I do that, I'm probably going to be leading by example, and from that, hopefully, it should spread as well.
I'm sure it'll be well received, John. And I told you I'm bad at timekeeping, but we will finish well in time. Don't worry. Alice, how do Anthony Collins view that challenge?
Yeah, I mean, I think we take a very similar approach to John in that we don't prescribe what people should do. The idea behind our volunteering is that we are a purpose-driven firm, and we want to give people the freedom to be able to make a difference in the areas that are important to them. And So a lot of our staff work with charities, they work with organisations outside of work in their own time to give back to the local community, and often these organisations might need a larger number of volunteers, and so we do get volunteering opportunities sent around to all staff really to say who would be interested in doing this. I know because I work with the National Literacy Trust on some of their projects in Birmingham, and they often say to me if they're setting up a particular insight day for a disadvantaged school, can we get some volunteers? And I send that around to all staff, and yeah, the take up is usually really good. But I think it's important to strike the balance between wanting to make a difference in certain areas but also giving employees that freedom, because I'm a believer that it is about engagement. It's about staff feeling valued and feeling empowered to do what's important to them, and I think that the volunteering programme is a really good way of achieving that.
Thanks, Alice. I think it is an interesting discussion. I think the notion of social value will become more and more to the fore, not just in public sector contracting, but across relationships with private sector as well. And I think there is perhaps a need for, it's almost like meshing two gear wheels. It's making sure that there is engagement with both organizations, the one that you're helping, the one that's helped. And that sometimes needs some facilitation, is all I would observe. That you'll find common ground if you work hard enough at it. I want, and Donald has asked some questions, and maybe one has already been answered, Donald, about carbon literacy. I think that's opened up in terms of volunteering. But one of the questions I wanted to ask, because here we are, 4 white people talking about these issues. And Black Lives Matter, I know it hit John hard. It's hit all of us hard, personally. I think we've all had to take a really difficult look at ourselves and our organizations. So one quick question, what are you doing about it? Because we've talked about it enough. We need to do stuff now. John?
Lots, to be honest. I think you're right. Black Lives Matter really hit me where it hurt. When I took a step back from the organisation, and again, it's on that trajectory of starting business up and trying to make money and make it survive. And then you look back at your business that you're creating and go, this isn't diverse. So we're doing quite a lot. We're doing about positive diverse recruitment. We're doing encouraging applicants from diverse communities. And there's a blueprint for PR, something called the Blueprint for PR, which is about basically working with BME communities to encourage them to get into PR. So we're working for our accreditation towards that. It is Stephen Lawrence Day as well today. It's the Earth Day of Stephen Lawrence, nearly 30 years. And there's a whole host of things we can say about, you know, how far we've come, but we've got to do much better. We've got to do much better. And, you know, I won't rest until we have done much better as an organisation. We're doing okay, but, you know, we could do much better. So Black Lives Matter, again, it's one of them life happens moments, the fossil flake moments where, you know, it hit me where it hurt and thought, yeah, you know, it wasn't for not wanting to do it. It's just I was drifting.
Yeah. Thanks, John. Like many of us. Alice, Courtney?
Yeah, happy to share what we're doing. I mean, I think you're absolutely right that Black Lives Matter has affected everybody at every level. And I think what it has shown to a lot of organisations is that statistical diversity is not enough. Saying, right, well, we want 20% of our partners to be from a BAME background is not going to be acceptable. What we need to be focusing on is inclusivity, and how do these individuals feel at work? Do they feel valued? Do they feel supported? And what we have done is set up a network, a BAME network, which includes staff from BAME backgrounds, but also allies. And what that has done really is given a good opportunity for people to voice what is affecting them in a safe environment. So we've got a senior champion of that who's part of our equality and diversity subgroup on the board. And we also have somebody from HR that attends that network. And I think those meetings are quite powerful in terms of helping people to share ideas and to think about how we might move forward. I think we are going to be looking at our recruitment strategies in the next few months and years. We're also looking at reward, and we published our ethnicity pay gap very recently, which has shown us that there is still work to do in this area. But I think having that network allows us to learn really from the individuals who are affected by this.
Thanks,
I think for
Alice.
the first time, people are able to share their views or feel comfortable doing so.
Great. Courtney?
Yeah, very similar to Alice in that we do have a Black Lives Matter action plan that's supported right from the very top of the business, and that kind of spans your recruitment, retention, reward. I suppose what we're doing from a sort of corporate responsibility side is that we've recently launched our national partnership with the Prince's Trust, which is really focused on supporting young people from Black heritage communities to help them with their entrepreneurship skills, their essential skills for life, supporting them kind of with their employability too. And that's through our kind of KPMG mentor network. So I suppose we're kind of looking at it from a sort of within our sort of own operations and supporting our own colleagues, and also looking outwardly to our outreach as well, making sure that there is that wider community support for Black heritage young people.
Thanks, Courtney. On the ethnicity pay gap, we will be doing some work on this and working with employers to understand what good looks like in this space, because it is confusing. But we will be consulting with our supporters and members about how we move that forward within our criteria moving forward. I think on this, I'd reflect on something Julia Rouse said in a previous webinar with us, is that I think we all need to have and allow space for angry disruptors here now. People are angry and need space to be angry, and it's allowed to be angry and kick us all the way to doing stuff on this. Mm-hmm. Finally, there's a nice question from Donald. It might be quite a quick one. Does anyone have a strategy for individual and collective pensions to switch to net zero funds? This could be a forgotten huge impact that sustainable businesses could apply. Anybody doing that? Or are they now going to do it now? Well, Donald suggested it.
Very quickly, we set up ESG communications in November, so we've got a whole division looking at this in the city. So it's a really important question, Donald. Personally, I'm looking at it. As a business, we are looking at it definitely. Net zero, is a challenge, isn't it? And it's finding the funds that we can invest in that are purely interested in net zero. So work in progress. It sounds like a get out of jail. All of this, but it's definitely work in progress. We'll never finish this, will we?
Thanks, John. Courtney and Alice, maybe I'll leave your corporate teams to respond to Donald at some other time. Maybe we could move on just to say thank you all so very much. I know your time's precious, John. So thank you so much. Normally we'd have a huge round of applause. If you want to hear more from John Quinton-Barber, I can't remember the date, it's early May. John is 10th of May. John is a guest on one of our podcast episodes, and you can hear more about John's journey to becoming a responsible employer. It really is interesting, including some insights to John's first taste of work, which is good. And the other episodes are available on all platforms at the moment. So thanks everyone for turning up to this month's event. Next month we're looking at the return to work, because everyone will be gearing up to perhaps returning to the office. We're looking at not just the need for hybrid working and how that can be managed, but also some of the psychological impacts that we may face ourselves and our employees. And it'll be Carrie Cooper who will be leading on that. So if you've heard Carrie speak, I'm sure you'll want to hear him again. He's superb on those sorts of issues. So thanks for everyone turning up, and thanks to you, John, to you, Courtney, to you, Alice. Thanks very much indeed. Have a good afternoon.
Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot. Bye.
Bye.